AI is transforming XR development, but what does it actually look like when a leading studio uses it every day to prototype, test, and ship? In these episodes, we dive into the workflows that are redefining what XR developers can do with AI.
I've started to think of it as a 10% tool, then a 20% tool, then a 30% tool, and now it's maybe 60% tool.
And that's Preston Platt, CTO and co-founder of Rock Paper Reality. He's one of the rare unicorns in this field combining art direction, 3D design, and XR development, with more than 16 years working in 3D modeling, animation, and spatial computing. Trust me, few people are as well versed in AI utilities, computer vision, and AR SDKs.
Generalists tend to love to learn, right? And in this new age of AI, the ones that like to learn are going to learn all these tools, make their workflows faster, make everything better at all times.
In this conversation, Preston reveals how his team prototypes faster than ever before, and why adopting AI is no longer optional if you want to keep up.
No, what it means is now I'm staying up 14 hours a day working, going harder and faster than I could before, because now I want to see how much I can physically get done in that time frame. I feel like I'm going at an insane pace and losing my mind, but I think the one saving grace is I'm having a great time.
But he also points out what AI still can do inside XR and where developers must tread carefully.
AI doesn't also understand interaction quite well, so you still need to be very creative around how you decide to use hand tracking the right way, or controllers the right way, or decide how you're going to attack semantic understanding of the world around you. I mean, obviously AI can't understand that, right?
Preston doesn't shy away from the harder truths either, and share how AI is reshaping 3D artistry itself.
It's not lost on me. There's a viewpoint that the artistry goes away. What happens in the future, I have no idea.
And when it comes to the future of XR hardware, he's very pragmatic about what pays today and was just a long play.
It's a long play. I think if anybody's in this space, right? If any of us are here, we've said next year is the year for 10 years now, 12, 14 years now. So look, is it financially viable today? Absolutely, probably not. I don't want to get in trouble with all of my great partners at both.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor Meshi, who made this episode possible. Meshi is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality stylized 3D models in just a minute. One feature I personally love is the ability to create stylized texture for any mesh, with or without UV. And since the release, Meshi's teams keep pushing amazing updates like texture inpainting, ultra-realistic sculpture, and the ability to rig and animate your character. To try it out, go to meshi.ai and start the 7 days trial to access all these incredible features. And now it's time to roll the title and welcome Preston under the spotlight. Preston, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Cheers. That was great. That was amazing. That was way too kind, but God, I loved it. Thank you. It's great to be here. Well, I'm excited.
Preston, now you got to deliver based on that intro, right?
I know that's gonna be rough. I know.
No, I think actually otherwise, because look, I've seen what you are building personally at Rock Paper Reality. So I think this is the first question is really a bit of a no-brainer, because the speed at which you are producing this type of content and experience left me a bit shocked. And while listening and doing some research, I've seen that you have used heavily also AI as part of your creative process. So my first question is, what are currently the tools and steps that you use to turn your ideas into these playable experiences?
Yeah, I mean, and first things first, right? When it comes to Rock Paper Reality, I am nothing without my team, right? So to bring that conversation into full force, right? Hiring a great team of learners that are also generalists is how you achieve speed, right? What I think is fun is that bridges itself into the AI conversation, right? You have all these generalists, they're all using AI to kind of help them in certain ways. Then your speed really starts to go, right? But yeah, as far as my AI workflows go, it's been a journey. I think it's been a journey for everybody using AI assisted anything. I was using it. It's funny, as the months have gone on, I've started to think of it as a 10% tool, then a 20% tool, then a 30% tool, and now it's maybe 60% tool, right? But I think it started as a code assist very early on. with my own workflows. And I think that's the other thing too. It's like using AI assisted workflows, but kind of making them your own that are also more quick and simple. And then what's crazy is now we're in the time where a lot of those tools and techniques that I've made are rendered useless, which is crazy. So it's like even in a 6-month time frame, that doesn't even matter. But yeah, it's been really taking generalistic practices, not only on my own, right? Everybody across the company, taking our generalistic way of working and just embracing AI, right? And like I always speak to this because AI inside of all of this is always like a wild conversation. What I tell my team and what I tell myself is still do the things that you have fun with, right? So make the AI assisted tools fun. Like have a good time. That's key, I think.
So there is one thing here that it still leaves me a bit like wondering. And it's this aspect of being a generalist, of hiring all generalists. Is that really, like, in a sense, like maybe more broadly, what do you describe as a generalist? Is that some that does 3D modeling, animation, coding, or the lines are a bit different? Who is a generalist based on your description?
Yeah, and so that's another key factor. This is kind of I would say like I am a broad generalist more than most, but when I say generalist, like for my 3D team, right? They not only model, they do texturing, they do animation, they do lighting, they do everything, right? And it's not necessarily that they each kind of have their specific skill sets that they're the best at. But what you notice is that generalists tend to love to learn, right? And in this new age of AI, the ones that like to learn are going to learn all these tools, make their workflows faster, make everything better at all times, right? So when I say generalist, you're right. It's not, I need a 3D artist that can code, or I need a UI designer that can code. It's, I need somebody that's not scared to touch everything and then get their hands dirty in everything, right?
So it is not a skill necessarily. It's more like an attitude towards schooling and towards learning.
It's half attitude, half actually can do the work, right? You can't BS that side of things.
Fair. So when we go back and based on this journey of using AI, especially right to build XR experiences, so you've built on Vision Pro, you of course you built for mobile AR, Quest, and so on. Can you share some example in which AI really succeeded and where AI really failed?
And I think what's crazy is that AI is really succeeding today more so than it has before. I mean, if this was 4 months ago, I would have had a completely different answer for you, right? Obviously, training against the newest APIs, right? And us in the XR industry know that we have new APIs thrown at us almost at every moment, right? New SDKs. And a lot of the times there's SDKs that we can't actually use with Code Assist, right? Because in general, you can't put certain SDKs on the web, right? So you have to keep it in an enclosed, very secure system. So I think the main thing, right? And this is what bridges all the gaps together is OpenXR, right? And so I strongly feel that if you embrace AI through OpenXR and then work through some of these other SDKs that we might have to play with in order to play with certain systems that are visual systems, like even C3AR that's going to come soon, right? If you work in this generalist OpenXR capacity, you can actually bridge a lot of that code yourself after the fact. Really, it's not a hard thing to do. But I mean, in general, I would say that AI doesn't also understand interaction quite well. So you still need to be very, I would say, creative around how you decide to use hand tracking the right way or controllers the right way, or decide how you're going to attack semantic understanding of the world around you. I mean, obviously AI can't understand that right now, right? So I think more so than anywhere, right? We still have a lot of freedom when it comes to AI inside of XR, which is awesome to me, right? And I think that'll exist for quite a while, where until visual systems come into place as simulators are concerned, there's not a lot you can do. So yeah, I mean, I think that's primarily my thing. I really lean into OpenXR in an AI code assisted way, and then I start to write my own stuff around it.
So, and maybe from your 3D artist perspective, because I think one element where right now GenAI is kind of like getting better and getting decent in a way is, of course, generation of assets or maybe motion, for example. Can you share some example of what worked maybe in your workflow or for 3D artists in your team?
Yeah. Well, first things first, right? There's ways to embrace it and there's ways to not embrace it, right? I'm choosing to embrace it, right? That's as someone who likes to move incredibly fast, I like to embrace it, right? Because I think, if we were to look back to, I think this is another good example is when photogrammetry made its way onto the scene, right? Now all of a sudden we can take a bunch of pictures of things and we've got a generated asset that is kind of the same as a generated 3D asset done from these tools, right? So let's start to bridge our perspective on all of this. I just used Tencent's recent tool, right? That's starting to actually do optimized geometry in quad-based formats. So that's opening a whole new spectrum that I'm just weeding my way into. So I'm going to kind of leave that a little out of the conversation. But right now, what I really find it valuable for is I have a concept in my mind. I go use some image and to concept up this interesting idea, right? I throw it into a 3D generator tool, right? I get this really cool looking output, but really terribly optimized asset, right? I'm not going to be able to rig the thing. I'm not going to be able to, UV layout it the correct way. I'm going to have to rebuild on top of it. But in normal workflows, if I was working in a normal way without AI, I would be image searching my butt off, right? Trying to find the images that I want. I'd be finding ways to do front, side, profile, everything. Probably go in and sculpt it or put in a bunch of low topology, work through the, at the end of the day, it's composition, right? So I'd be doing all that work anyway. And it's not necessarily anything I find fun or creative whatsoever anyway, right? I think all of us 3D artists looked at ourselves and we're like, do we love that stage? Not at all, right? So I use that as a proportional model, right? So now all of a sudden I've got my proportions, I've got a general look of texture and everything, and I've got this great concept piece that I can work from. And there we have it, right? Now with Tencent's new tool, things are getting a little crazy, but I still think there's going to be a lot of really interesting bake techniques that are done. And I have lots of talks discussing this from the past where a lot of my optimization routes for lighting and everything else and UVing, I think they're going to come into play just in a more, I don't know, I guess fast and quick way.
So when you mention, and there we have it what? Because based on your description, it sounds like this is like rapid prototyping on steroids, right? So I can just incredibly quickly. Have you been able to reuse some of the assets that you have created, or how do you go from there?
That's an interesting perspective. I think in general, all of the assets that I end up using are all game ready at that point. So when I reuse them, I'm really just reusing them. And then speaking personal, right? But only personal projects. When it comes to RPR, we don't really reuse anything, to be honest with you. It's kind of just, we go with the flow here. We create the new, maybe we use it as inspiration. So, and especially when it comes to generative, no, I dump it instantly because it's not, I might as well make something new at this rapid, to your point, rapid prototype perspective.
So you mentioned right now that you got this prototype, and what is at the end, let's say the goal for these apps? In a sense, like, is there ever a moment where you kind of like, okay, I want to build something quickly that maybe just is as a test app to raise some hype? Like, what is the goal of these projects, and do you use AI in the same way regardless of the type of app or experience that you end up producing?
Yeah. So what's so fun about this conversation is that the perspective is constantly changing. I almost think that's a good, almost attributed way to look at AI today as my growth journey within the last 6 months, right? How rapid it's been. But I started off about, I guess it was a year ago, using AI to say, let's say I took one of our 3D artists and I said, okay, we're going to make a game in a week and we're going to see how far we get, right? The goal is to put it on the App Store. Right. And we're going to try to put it on both the Quest and the Apple Vision Pro store. Right. That means that optimizationally, we need to hit benchmarks for Quest, and optimizationally, we need to hit the benchmarks for Test Flight. So kind of went at it quick and fast, learned a lot, right, about the AI process and how we could integrate code assist that had nothing to do with generative on the AI for kind of UI. I mean, we used very little for that. We didn't even use it at all for the 3D. I mostly used it as a code assist tool to just build as fast as humanly possible. But now fast forward, I'm doing a lot of these kind of just on my own in a day to 3 day timeframes, right? Where I just want to prototype ideas together. Like I was in a house in Bali and there was this door that just opened to a giant drop, right? And so I'm like, okay, if I've got this giant 10-foot drop and I've got this cool door here, let's do something creative. Let's use code assist for or AI assist for all of this and just see what we can do. And I think it was really fun. Like, I mean, they're not things that I was, in this standpoint going to ever put out, but they're these weird kind of personal projects I've got to lean back on for the future where I just like flush out interaction. I was like, okay, if I'm doing a launching mechanism that's just going to launch out into this giant field, like how would I go about that using XR Interactions Toolkit? Like, I've got polyspatial that doesn't have grab mechanics from XR interaction. So how do we go with a pinch gesture and a gaze gesture to make that work? So it's just like this rapid prototyping has just been like this really almost incredibly fun way to like level myself up in just a journey of I guess just self-learning, right?
So then you are saying that a lot of these, let's say, very ambitious or let's say pushing the limit kind of experiments have the final goal of mostly learning, right? And
Yes.
then out of that, some of this learning might end up or will end up in what is a future workflow. But it's the piece is that idea.
Yes.
Now, how can you afford that? In a sense that I imagine that there are gazillions projects, right? Mm-hmm. And is that something that you kind of like you and maybe your team, right? Because it doesn't sound like it's just you kind of like drag people in these crazy experiments. So how can you afford it? Is that you dedicate part for play and discovery? Is that something that you just weave into your own time? Because I imagine that people might be struggling to do these experiments on their own and maybe they can learn something from you.
Yeah, I mean, most of the recent ones I've just been doing on my own in my own time. I mean, I do think it's funny. You would hope that AI would help you sleep at night, right? In a way, let's just say, you'd hope that it would be like, hey, I got so much done in 2 hours that was the equivalent of what I would have got in a full day. No, what it means is now I'm staying up 14 hours a day working and going harder and faster than I could before because now I want to see how much I can physically get done in that time frame. I mean, as someone on the brink of insanity, I guess, I don't have a lot of things to say that would make people feel better. I feel like I'm going at an insane pace and losing my mind. But I think the one saving grace is I'm having a great time, right? So, but yes, no, it's all just go as hard and fast as possible. I think that there is a race right now for how much you can achieve, how much you can learn, and to level yourself up as fast as possible.
This race, right? Because there is also that idea about the pushback from artists, right? So there are creatives, coders, whoever it is, right, that pushes back against AI. Between those that are embracing, there is this race in a way also, right? Because who is the one that implements it faster or learns it faster or stays more up to date? How do you see this evolving? And maybe how do you answer to the people that are trying to stay away or maybe the one that are not investing as much as you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a pretty decent perspective on this, right? Because I started doing 3D animation when I was 13 years old, right? Before I wanted to do anything, I wanted to be an animation director. I was really lucky. I got to hang out with a bunch of the guys at Pixar when I was very young, got really inspired about the 3D process, right? It's not lost on me that there is a viewpoint that the artistry goes away, right? And right now, I think there's still a lot of artistry. What happens in the future? I have no idea, right? I have no idea. And if I could stop it, maybe I would. I'm having a great time, which is the hard part about it. But with that like broad knowledge, right, of 3D, and not only just broad knowledge, I'm working 14 hours a day now. I haven't not done that, right? So my craft has been honed significantly. Does it hurt somewhere inside to think, oh, that 12, 14, will have 15, 16, whatever, how many years I've been doing this now? That skill set that I've crafted and I've honed for that just to go away, and all of those, knowing the Maya interface backward and forward better than anything else that I know in this world, to all of a sudden that disappears. It does have this perspective like that would hurt, right? But if you change your mindset, right, and you just had to say like, look, that 16 years of absolute hard work that I did is now maybe a perspective and a creative outlook that I can take to the generative side, right? Maybe there's a world where that is still incredibly beneficial, But at the end of the day, we're not going to change the way the world goes, right? I mean, back when 2D animation existed, they looked at the people at Pixar doing 3D animation. And they're like, what are you doing? That's not art. That's insane. Now today, everybody wants to be a 3D artist, right? At least in my circle. I mean, maybe not everybody in the world, but you get the point. I think that there's a world where I'm choosing to embrace. I know that people could see that in a wrong capacity. I'm sure people could get very upset with me for doing that, but you're not going to change the world. I'm looking at how do I make it artistic and fun and still my vision, no matter what way, whatever way this goes, right?
So I want to get back a second to another element that, let's say, also has an AI layer to it. And that is especially very relevant in XR, being, for example, the AI NPCs. Right. So I know you have heavily experimented with that, like Inward, 11 Labs. So what do you think is working right now when it comes to this AI-driven NPC, and what is, again, just still broken?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My entire morning was about Inworld today. So this is very topical for me. I think that latency is always going to be a problem. I think we see that now where you talk into the mic, text to speech happens, it goes and processes it, comes back, and you're doing a nice little idle for 10 seconds just to talk to a character. And you're kind of like, I want it to be quick. We're also seeing that hallucinations happen. And for a brand, that is incredibly bad. I think we saw that with Fortnite and Darth Vader, right? So not only is it, there's a lot of technical hurdles, I think, that need to exist to get it there. I would definitely say with Inworld and being able to train this character and put it on rails and have it say what it's going to say, we're getting really close. And even today, playing with Inworld now, it's made leaps and bounds. And I'm really, really excited for the future of it. But I don't know. I think there's got to be this moment where you want the character to have so much freedom to say what it wants and to really think what it wants to think and to guide you along a journey, but you don't want to feel like you're encumbered by it, right? So just like in 3D, where we've had the uncanny valley of faces and interactions, we're going to have the same thing with talking to a character. But I do think it'll get there, and I think it'll be very, very beneficial. I think when somebody creates a game that has a Cortana that is a very dynamic version of a AI character, we're going to really feel it. But until worlds go truly open so that a story could be generated at any moment in time, and we're not going to feel like it truly has agency to tell you and interact with you in that kind of beautiful way.
Whenever I think about this AI character, I think that the first thing that we think is, okay, we got an NPC, let's say a villager in a town, and then it's going to there and it's going to have a full conversation. But I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing that AI characters will be made for or will evolve into. Like, is there are we going to get lost in this world, even though it remains coherent, right? Is that really what's the effective way of implementing AI NPC? Shouldn't we maybe think about where is that this would really make sense? So based on your experience, right, beside having a random NPC that can tell you anything about the environment he's in or whatever happened maybe in your story, are there some things that you found were specifically impactful when implementing this in your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, we found it really impactful for brands, right? When brands want to tell the story of their brand and they want to have something that's a very singular asset that they're talking to. And I think that that's where this works right now. I think what you're getting at, which I completely agree with, is, if I'm going to go play The Last of Us or some sort of really well-driven game, I don't want to talk to everybody. Why would I want to do that? You lose the artistry, right, of what is this story? And until the artistry is the living, breathing world around you is so complex and dense, why do that, right? Now, if it's a surprise and delight moment where instead of teaching the player controls, they're talking to an NPC character as they're on this journey, and they're psychologically, because great story is manipulation at the end of the day. If they're being manipulated to learn along the journey and not feeling like they're learning, right? That's when it wins. I think that's where it'll win. But until because you're right, if I'm going to be in a game, I want to be driven artistically and very, very creatively towards my goals, my everything, and I want to have dopamine hits at all times. It's not going to be that for a little while, for sure. But I completely agree with you.
Another thing that is one of my, let's say, issue that I have with this AI NPC, especially in VR, I don't know, it just bothers me even more, is the fact that I never know when I should talk, when they are listening, when they are thinking, when they should reply. And I hate it. Like, I hate it because it just breaks everything. Even if their response is perfect, I'm just like, I start talking and then they talk over me and then I stop and then they stop. What advice do you give, like, let's say, to help people, because this is something that hardly people have figured out in a sense yet. What worked for you to kind of like orchestrate that form of interaction?
Yeah, I completely understand exactly the perspective you're speaking about. It's funny you say specifically in VR, because I actually do think in VR we are light years behind the idea of user experience and UI. Right? I just saw recently, I saw an integration of a world that I really loved that had a great 2D user interface to it that really gave you the understanding that it was actually waiting to speak, right? It was loading in the background. And I think a lot of people are trying to hide the loading bar because that breaks the character. But hey, if we're here anyway, we know what's going on. Tell us that you're loading that text to speech, please. Like we don't care to be in the dark here. Um, but yeah, I think we've I just really think it comes down to user experience as far as getting through that for now. I also think, we've talked about latency. I think latency's got to come down quite considerably. And as people, we kind of tend to talk over each other, especially in this TikTok era where I feel like people are talking over each other more as our brains are starting to move faster and faster. But to go back to your question, are you thinking more from a user experience perspective, right?
Yes. So, and to be very precise, I still bring up this example of Bring Traveler, that is this traveling, let's say, app that is available on Quest. They use basically like a walkie-talkie that acts as a guide. There, I love it because when I push the button, it means that I speak, right? So it speak when I leave the button, it's loading, and I know that it's loading, right? And when it replies, I see the wave of the other person speaking, let's say, right? So they have created this way where I clearly know when I'm inputting something, where I'm waiting for a reply, when I'm getting that reply, and it just makes for a better experience. This is, of course, for a disembodied interaction with AI, right? So I'm not talking to a character, but I am interacting through an artifact that is this walkie-talkie. So that's kind of like my question. Have you seen something from a purely even UI, right, as you mentioned, the loading bar that works particularly well?
To be fair, no. And I wish I was the one to create it for you and be like, yeah, my solution is sick. No, I haven't. It's still the problem that I see and I don't even want to interact with personally. Um, but I do think, what I have noticed is in a lot of broader ways when you are kind of actively recording and then stop recording, people kind of tend to have like a funny conversation, and then they kind of like, it's almost like AI is sitting there as a fun little pet that's off to the side, and they're like, hey, what's it going to say this time? Oh, here it comes, let's see what it's got, right? So I think maybe leaning into the fun element for now might solve that, right? But yeah, I have nothing, unfortunately.
Fair. So if you have a good solution, please share it below in the comments. Always happy to try it out.
Yeah.
So at Rock Paper Reality, let's say you do a lot of these experiments, but to learn indeed how to do AI assisted coding or maybe Gen AI or AI driven characters. What else do you work on? And maybe just if you could give us a bit of an overview when we think about, for example, mixed reality, like headset based or even mobile, or even maybe what's this future for smart glasses? Like, what's your pipeline look like?
Yeah, I mean, the pipeline for a long time has been web AR experiences, solely because of the fact that devices are just not there yet, right? We have Apple's device, which I think is one of the greatest devices to hit the market. It's too expensive right now, right, for mass adoption. We've got Android XR coming that's going to be really great with what Samsung's going to deliver. I think that's going to broaden the market a little bit more. And I think, everybody talks about glasses as being the main adopter. I have 8 years of experience working early days at a company called ODG, working on see-through optics, right? So I know the challenges of that as well. So to get back to your question, right, about what does the pipeline look like? It's mostly been web AR experiences. And what I have my entire history of is getting in first with a lot of these SDKs and flushing them out, optimizing inside of them, pumping out experiences for them, adding experiences that they can go show and inspire others to build with, and then also inspire upper level management to say, hey, more funding, let's go. But that's been most of the pipeline. And, I can tell you what I hope to see for the future. I recently just worked on Apple's headset, driving a game in Swift, which was something I'd never done before, something I'd kind of never thought I wanted to do before. But I kind of got a good little nudge to do it, and I did start that journey, and it was incredible. So I know that our pipeline is going to start looking a lot more like Swift native visionOS experiences for the future as well. We're leaning more into how do we take the future to come for Android XR? How do we integrate AI into how everyday tool sets can be kind of enhanced with AI at runtime? And, I think leaning into the Quest is something I've never done. I think I'm starting personally to do that with a game that's coming out soon called Defenderella. So the pipeline has been a lot of web and a lot of first time experiences with new headsets. And will still be that way when glasses come out. But I'm hoping adoption will still continue, right? I think as we adopt into, I think when people start to realize that these headsets can do live sports the way that they would want to do it, I've seen that be a real driver towards adopting new users. I think what I lean into personally is shared experiences. If you look at the new avatars that have come out with the Persona avatars from Apple, it is one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. I just yesterday sat and did an entire day's worth of work with a colleague that was in a Vision Pro, and we just had our personas there, and it just felt like I was in the other room with someone, completely and holistically. So I think that there's this idea that we're going to open up remote work even further. I think personas in these connective ways of through these headsets are going to really unlock the bar, and I hope that's where it goes. But to get back to your point, I went on a rant there, and I'm sorry for that.
No, but it makes sense. It makes sense. So you're saying, okay, mostly it's web AR experiences because it's just the devices are there. We haven't really leaned or built much for Quest at the moment, if I understood correctly, right?
Yes.
And instead, there is now been some traction on the Vision Pro, Vision OS side, right? You mentioned that you built that game, as you described it as incredible, and we're going to get more project around that. Can you elaborate on that? Like, in a sense, incredible, why, how? And is that driven by market demand? Or like, what's the driver for investing on a device that you said clearly is too expensive?
Yeah, the beauty is the way that Swift for Vision OS is built to enable a share play experience, right? Where all of a sudden I've got this game and this game board in front of me next to somebody else that's got a Vision OS headset. It's as simple as a button click, and then all of a sudden our shared session is synced completely, and we're up and running. The way the backend is built with FaceTime and how you interact on these layers and just network them together, they've come up with great samples like their tabletop kit example, right? Where they've built all the networking of these actions, these game actions and everything else. It's kind of like you get in there. It's this weird barrier to entry of switching your brain from game development, like you'd think of it today. And then all of a sudden thinking, okay, I've got to almost look at this in a web framework style way, but then also in its own interesting Swift way. And getting back to why it's incredible, playing around the table, both with physical people and with virtual people that are at this quality and caliber that Apple supports and has pushed heavily and has also created walled gardens for, is just wild. Right?
No, I mean, and it's insane. So there were these avatars circulating about codec avatar from Meta, right? That some time ago, and I think we are there. I mean, let's be honest; those avatars are just incredible.
Yes.
So I still think that there is still a problem of demand, right? I mean,
Of course.
from a studio, right, that is now there and says, okay, we need to invest our resources and try to get our salespeople out to get projects, right? Imagine. Is there still an opportunity to work on Vision OS that is not just hey, oh, we build this cool demo and that's it? Like, what's the financial return for a studio who is put there and needs to do some tough prioritization if they want to survive?
Yeah, no, and it's a great question, right? I think what I try to do constantly is think about who's going to win in certain capacities, right? Um, and I strongly believe that Android is also going to heavily win here, right? I really do. So equally, right? When I say I'm leaning into Swift, I'm also equally leaning into Android XR and what's coming out on these new headsets on that side. It's a long play. I think if anybody's in this space, right? If any of us are here, we've said next year is the year, right? For 10 years now, 12, 14 years now. So look, is it financially viable today? Absolutely, probably not, right? And I don't want to get in trouble with all of my great partners at both, right? But it's a long play, and I think just inherently, I'm looking for things that are supported, teams that are built, and what they're supporting for the future, and also who reach out to me and feel passionate about me being a part of their system, right? I'm very passionate about Android and Apple because they're passionate about having me there, right? And I do understand that that's not something that everybody gets to feel, right? But I can tell you that as someone that's worked in this for 15 years now, right? I love what Apple's doing. I love what Android XR is doing. Though that's where I'm leaning because I want to, right? I don't have the keys to the castle. I don't know. I can't predict the future. I can only do I can only predict as much as I can. But to your point, no, financially viable, not at all. That's why WebXR exists today. That's why a lot of VR games exist today, because they are grabbing the adoption that is available.
No, and I mean, thank you very much for also the honesty in a way, right? So I think that sometimes we kind of like try to wrap it, and I think that if you can afford the long play and differentiate your portfolio, and allocate carefully those resources, I think that there is value, if not only in the value that you can generate by sharing the work that you're doing on these cutting edge devices, and then using those as a tool to attract eye and attention and start conversation. There is certainly value in that, 100%. As well as building relationship with these companies, right? Because great work, right, it's often recognized. There aren't many crazy people building on this platform in a way. So
exactly,
you stand out, and then you get acknowledged, and you build relationship with other Apple, Android, Google, or whatever that might be. There is also value there, but it's a landscape that needs to be carefully, let's say, surveyed and evaluated based on the status in which the team, the agency, the studio, the company is.
Yes.
And you brought about Android XR, right? And in general, we're talking about Muhan coming up, more glasses. I know that Rock Paper Reality is also a partner for X-Rio. When we think about when you just personally think about the type of content that's going to be on those devices, what do you think that's going to be? Entertainment, media consumption, utility? Where do you think that there is a need for, and there is a good match with those type of devices?
I think it's a great question, right? There's two parts to this. First, it's what is the OS level going to take over when it's AI assisted? I think that's number one, right? Because I think we have to think about that as developers, is that these operating systems are going to get so smart at some point that what do you build as a layer on top of them that they can't already achieve, right? And the second part to it is I strongly believe that shared experiences, and not only shared experiences, but embracing an entire ecosystem, right? To go back to what I said before, OpenXR, those are the two kind of things that I think are going to win or be the viable options for what you build in the future on these devices. So to go to what is the operating system going to look like? I mean, I think obviously content's going to continue to change and be variable. I think more so than ever, I used to have a very, very kind of perfect path that I thought everything was going to go towards. And I really leaned into share play and shared experiences because I saw that as the option, right? If you go back to when the Wii came out, I kind of am trying to envision almost a Wii 2.0 moment, right? Where families are coming together and they're gaming and they're playing and they've got this kind of great moment together. I really want that for the future. But when it comes to generative AI and the game sectors that, Runway is leaning into as far as fully generative games, right? I still don't know how those are going to be networked over a multiplayer network and a shared experience. They'll get there, I'm sure, one day. I don't see the path for it right now. But when you build these systems, it's kind of like thinking, okay, if the OS layer is going to suggest and to guide me down a path, what is it viable for, right? It's going to have faster interaction with your vision, right? So it's going to know what's around you. So if I open up my fridge and I see my fridge is open there and it sees what I have in there and it's watching me, make things that I make, whatever that might be, it's going to ping me off to Instacart to go grab groceries, right? So maybe that system already exists today and I don't need to build a layer that says, hey, I'm going to find you your groceries, etc., right? Maybe there's an integration layer that you go straight to Instacart with and you say, hey, look, just in case the OS layer doesn't exist, maybe I help you build that visual system that's taking that camera feed and applies all of that AI logic to it. So I think that's where developers are going to have a hard time right now. And that's where I have a hard time personally, kind of trying to imagine the OS layer and where I fit inside of it. So that's one. And then as far as, opening up into shared experiences, we've obviously seen, we've seen a lot of progress with this with Google Maps and these more web XR experiences that are really like opening up the world around you creatively with people next to you. I go back to Pokemon Go. It was the coolest non-AR, but we call it AR game that existed where it actually brought communities of people together in all these fascinating ways. I think that there's opportunity there for creative thought process. And I try to constantly tell people, like, go look at the people that innovated in ways that were mind-blowing. I still go back to HQ Trivia. I think that was the most innovative idea I've ever seen, right? Pokemon Go, also so innovative about the creative uses of the technology around them. My hope is that as developers and everybody here, gaming, entertainment alike, I don't think we have the perfect guidance on this is what I see it's going to look like. I think the most creative people are going to start to bridge all these different technologies together to create that new thing that we don't even know right now.
And that's probably the most exciting thing because, even when I look at what's on spectacles, right? That I think it's kind of a glimpse of how things might move and evolve. Yeah. There is a fair bit of, let's say, gamification, probably because, of course, it comes from this lens environment and these filters and so also the community around it. I think it might lean towards that side. How do you see that? Like if we take aside, do you think that it's gonna be a utility layer or a productivity layer for these apps and experiences? Or not? Like I'm just thinking, like, what are we gonna do with those in the first generation? Because of course, like 10 years from now, exactly, we'll see and we'll learn from it. But if you can imagine in the first 2-3 years when not many people have it, people start building content on it. What would you build on it?
Yeah, this is the crazy thing. So, we live in this world right now where we're very competitive, right? Through business and everything else. And what we're seeing is that AI is starting to come in and take a lot of that business, right? And adapt people's workflows and kind of, it's a hard, weird perspective to look at for how AI is going to come into the workforce. I think people are inherently competitive. I think what you're kind of primarily seeing with this gamification is maybe, I love the Dyson, vacuum that's gamified. I think that's super fun. I don't know if everybody's going to turn that on for every time they want to use it. I do think right now what I'm leaning into is a competitive landscape because I do think, if anything, everybody loves to compete in these aspects. And if you make gamification or content that's competitive, you see communities built around that. So I don't know, right? And I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, it's just insane that all of my perspectives are shifting every month with this AI layer that's come in, right? So I think we just have to lean into who people are and then kind of imagine the world where AI comes in. What do we want to do at that point, right? And I think for a lot of us, we're going to want to compete. A lot of us are going to want to build. UGC tools are going to be bigger than ever, in my opinion, right? So, yeah.
It's tough, Preston. I put you through a lot. I really twist this time, but I really appreciate your openness and also transparency, because I think it's very hard to find the answer nowadays. I mean, there aren't. I mean, nobody really know. I think we are still at a stage where these devices are going out, and the attitude is more like, let's see what people build with it. Let's see how people use it. Yeah. Right. And I think we are here in this journey, and it's like, say, people like you that even probably thanks to the power of AI can prototype, fail quickly, and build at a speed that is, let's say, unprecedented on devices that are evolving at an unprecedented speed as well. Right. So I think exciting time, Preston. It was a real pleasure. Anything else would you like to add?
No, this was great. And I really appreciate your time. This was a really fun conversation. I mean, I rarely get to like kind of go through this with someone. So it's really nice. I really appreciate you.
Great conversation. Thank you very much, Preston.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.